Homeless Children's Education Fund exists in order to provide educational opportunities to children experiencing homelessness in Allegheny County. We do that by providing after-school programs in various homeless provider agencies throughout Allegheny County.
The idea is that after school the kids will have a place to come back to, that they will have support. So we provide educational instructors that will be there setting up a program for the kids.
We cannot do this without support from volunteers in the community.
HCEF's after-school program is part of a community of support with our volunteers and the staff and the instructors and our literacy specialists. We work together to provide literacy support and also behavioral and emotional support to some extent. So there are staff members in many of the shelters who may be a part of the program or maybe they're just for added support. There are after-school instructors who are there to provide lessons, to provide activities, to provide just general instruction. And there are the volunteers who are so key to the success of the program by providing one-on-one support when it's available, or working in small groups to help with their homework, to read stories together, to just play games and show the child that you care.
The support that they offer the children, and most importantly the support that they offer us staff, is immeasurable. Being able to group over on one end of the playground, another group inside, a group with the basketball court. We can't do that without HCEF's help.
They truly make it possible for us to give children one-on-one support. Often kids are in really large classes all day long, and then they don't have access to much outside of the shelter environment when they come home. So the chance for them to work one-on-one with a tutor who's caring and a good listener is so hugely important to our program. One of the main components of the after-school program is working with kids on literacy. That's really an important goal for us. So we stress that all volunteers coming in can play a role with this, even if you're not a trained reading specialist, even if you don't have a degree in education, you can still play a part.
One of the big difficulties that kids have when they start, if they've been having periods of homelessness before they even started school, they fall behind pretty quickly.
If a child is struggling with reading or they're really great at reading, we work with them to make sure that they get continued support with literacy.
The learning centers are all equipped with fairly extensive book collections, and so once you get to know what a certain student is interested in, you can help them pick out books that are going to be in their interest area but also appropriate for their age and for their reading level.
So we think about what are the kinds of activities that could take place. One would be just reading a story to a child, because that's modeling fluent reading. You can check for comprehension by just asking even an open-ended question like, so what's going on here? Or you can model confusion by saying, I don't get it. Do you understand what's going on in the story right now? I don't get it. You might be able to do with children some echo reading, which means I read and then they read, I read and they read. Or choral reading, we all read together. That's a marvelous way to provide some support, because then a struggling reader doesn't have to know every word. And if they don't know every word, everybody doesn't know it. So I would encourage them to think about their own experiences when they were growing up with literacy. What seemed to work, what were the positive things they remember, or maybe what were the negative things? Because it's probably very similar to the children who are here, because there again, if we think of them as typical children, they're experiencing the same kinds of things that we experienced when we were growing up.
Another thing that's really popular and tends to go over really well is just playing literacy games. Things like hangmen, categories, balderdash, all kinds of games in that realm that get kids to practice vocabulary, practice their language skills, and it does so in a really soft way, so they don't feel like they're studying. They don't feel like they come home from school and just have to keep going with that.
One of the main things that we are asked to do by the moms and by the program is to help the kids with their homework.
A lot of kids don't have much time during the school day when they have one-on-one support. So this can be the only time in their day when they're really working with somebody in an individualized setting.
You know, school day is pretty stressful. It's like a regular 9 to 5 nowadays, and you know, they go from one structured environment and they have to hop into another one. It doesn't seem very fair, but the goal is to kind of cultivate a culture where the status quo is doing homework and reading or doing some sort of game.
Often the homework is too difficult for any student experiencing difficulty, or it might be too much, or it might be uninteresting. So anything we can do to scaffold that and support that and help them to get their homework completed also gives us an indication of the areas that need the most help. If the child maybe has a worksheet to read a story and answer the questions, maybe the reading is too difficult. So maybe we can take turns. I read some, you read some, or I can make that suggestion to the people working with the child.
There's always something a volunteer can do to help out in the Learning Center or in the after-school program, whether it's homework help. Even if you see another volunteer working with a child, it's great to just join in. There might be something extra that you can add or something that you can share. Or maybe you're going to take a small group of kids and you're going to work with them to read a story together or play a game together, practicing taking turns, things like that. All of that can be really important.
Every time you meet someone, it's like a new experience. So I think, as much as I like to say that there's like a rubric or something like a template for it, you have to, the best thing to do is, if you haven't worked with a kid before, if someone else has, talk to them about, how's this kid doing? What do they need help on?
I think when I first started working with HCEF, when I was a volunteer, I would work with a child who was really eager to read or really excited about reading or getting their homework done. But sometimes I would work with a child who was hesitant to read, who didn't seem excited that I was there to help them with their reading. And I kind of questioned myself and just tried to figure out what the best thing I could do was to help them. And when I look back now, I kind of realized those were the most important moments, are the moments where the child was hesitant or not so excited to do their homework or get reading into a book. That's the time when I can share my gift and my joy for reading with them. And taking that time out to listen to a story can be just as helpful as struggling through sounding out a word. And I think that's something that I know it's important to remember in those moments when you're working with a child who is struggling or not so eager to get started. Before you get started on their activities for the day, before you get started on their homework or reading a book, it's so important to take a minute to find out about how the child is doing, how their day has been. Just to have a little short conversation where you set the child at ease with you and with the environment. That can make a world of a difference for a child. And snack time at many of our locations is a great way to do that. Kids have an opportunity to sit down together, to talk amongst themselves, to talk to you, to find out what they've been up to over the last week or a few days. And it's a time to share positive stories, and it's also a time to talk about things that might be a little bit difficult, like if they had a bad day or something happened at school. And that's going to help you help them later on, so you can keep that in mind as you're working with them on homework or whether you're reading a book. Although each learning center is totally unique and different, and each shelter has their own type of learning center, the majority of learning centers, if not all of them, have library books. They have computers, they might have iPads and other technology. All of these resources are tools that children can use, whether it's just to pick up a book and start reading, or the computers are there for research, for games, for literacy.
Things have changed since I've started working here. Now there's like always someone there that's a child specialist, and it's nice. Some kids start to come in. There's usually someone there already that's working with a kid, and they say, or maybe two kids, and says, hey, why don't you help out with this? Or there's other volunteers, and they're working, and they say, hey, why don't you help so-and-so with their homework? So you get there, and there's the stage is set, there's already kids doing homework, and then as kids come in, then you start to do homework.
Our programming in the evening is less structured. During the school year, the kids are at school. We do our tutoring programs with HCEF's partnership after school, and then where's the time that the kids can just be kids and free play without the structured activities? And that's on our evening hours, and that presents challenges though to 2 or 3 staff that we might have present, but with the volunteers here, everybody's safe, everybody's happy, and we can have lots of different activities going on all at once.
We have a literacy toolkit at every center, and so if you look for it, it's a bin, and it's got all kinds of games, it's got all kinds of materials and resources, even lesson plan ideas. You'd be surprised how many activities you can do with kids that are really, really valuable, that just use scraps of paper and a pencil, or tearing up pictures from magazines and having them write stories about them. So there's all kinds of creative ideas in the toolkit. You can talk to the instructor at your center, and maybe they can give you some great ideas for activities that you can bring in. Some of our volunteers will go to the library every week and bring books back for certain kids.
There are all kinds of educational activities that kids can do to support, whether it's phonics or letter sounds or the alphabet, or playing a game where they learn out some new vocabulary words. There are dozens of resources that the Learning Center provides. There are usually desks and places for students to work.
We do activities inside during the winter months, from crafts and art to puzzles and games. With HCEF support, we've been able to, kids are having a lot of fun with this Kinect console, which is an additive to the Xbox, and lots of dance games and sporting games that we're able to do inside. Kids sweating up a storm, and we're playing video games, which is very nice.
All those things kind of help make it a positive space and a comfortable environment for kids to do homework and just enjoy learning and reading.
One of the issues that can come up when you're volunteering is that sometimes students will develop such a trust relationship with you that they might divulge really personal information. And so it can be very hard for a volunteer sometimes to know what to do when sensitive issues come up. So it's important to know that there are staff at the agency who can help. Usually most organizations that we work with will have trained child specialists, child advocates, or someone else who fills that role. So if you find that a student's coming to you and telling you information that's of a very personal nature, maybe something that raises concerns for you, don't feel like you as a volunteer have to bear all the weight of that or even fix the problem. Sometimes just listening to the child in a neutral way is the best way to help, and then you can make a connection with the staff at the agency and let them know if there's something that's really concerning you.
Confidentiality is something that we really remind the volunteers that they need to be paying attention to. Of course, the children really need to be protected, and they've been told by their parent that they're not to let anybody know that they're in a shelter, and they, of course, have this whole privacy issue that has to do with homelessness. And of course, they don't want the kids at school to know they're homeless, because then they might get teased. And so confidentiality is a big challenge for the volunteers, because they need to remember that when they go out into the community after they've left the program, the agency, that they do not talk about the children either. Kids. Diversity is something that we all have to work at, and what I say is there's racial diversity, economic diversity, and religious. And I usually talk about the economic diversity because most of these children have never been anywhere, and some of them have never gone across the river, let alone on vacation somewhere. And so I encourage volunteers to remember that if they do go away for a couple of weeks, when they come back, they don't say, "Oh, I went on vacation." They just say, "I'm sorry, I wasn't able to be here." The challenge is that when we have racially motivated sort of stereotypical thoughts where we're stereotyping somebody, we just need to remember that we all have them. We all experience some form of distinguishing ourselves from somebody else, and we just need to notice those thoughts and let them go.
Volunteers can be that one extra person in the child's life who's not connected to school or to case management or to any of these other structures, who cares about them and who makes time in their life to be with this child. Working in an HCEF Learning Center can be a great chance to get to know a child, to get to know many kids, to see them grow, to see them learn, and to know that you're having a really important impact on their education.
Over a few visits, hearing a child say, "I really don't like reading," and to see them later on go and run into the library and bring you a book and say, "Will you read this to me?" Or "I can't wait to read this to you," or "I read this to Mom last night," and see the joy in their face is such a cool thing.
Basically, I would say enjoy the kids. It's a wonderful place, and there's just fantastic things that have happened, and I've worked with wonderful people, and I've worked with wonderful children and met wonderful parents, so it's a great adventure.
Literacy changes the way people look at their situation. It's, I don't want to say books take you out of the world and show you a new magical world, but I think there's evidence for that.
Each moment that you spend with a child is positive time. And whether it's listening to them talk about their day or playing a game with them or helping them with their homework, all that positive influence that you have can be memorable to a child. Despite the moments that are a challenge, despite the struggles that you might have with a particular student or just a particular day in general, it's so important to remember that that positive attitude that you have yourself is contagious, and the kids pick up on it.
It's a unique experience in working with these children, and something that will be very rewarding to you, and something that you will find that you will get great satisfaction out of for a very long time.